How do we get from here to there? And that's what we're going to be talking about today. So 2 years ago, I came here to do a talk at a TEDx talk with the Dandelion Foundation. And it kind of, in a certain way, kicked off what we're talking about here. My concept was, what would it take to make Guernsey the 6th blue zone? And it sounds like from the research that Maskell's doing that it might just happen next week when he realizes that there's enough of them already, which will be pretty exciting. How do you do it in 4 weeks or do it in 4 days? But yeah, it started there. I made some pretty, maybe not controversial, but some ideas there that were maybe seemingly controversial. So I said, you should make friends, drink wine, and get dirty. And so, people might have been a little bit skeptical of that, and you may be, people in this room may be a little bit skeptical of what you're going to hear later today, because there are some new ideas. But the latest research shows that if you are skeptical, you're going to not live as long as everyone else. So there's a piece. This came out actually this week, and it showed that people who are generally skeptical and not open to ideas don't turn to live longer, and it's a complex connection between our thoughts and our telomere length. And so I'm going to give you some other ideas here today, so you've got to keep your mind up. Now, we have hit the zeitgeist. I don't know if you follow online or see, but the number of articles that are talking now about living to 100, creating blue zones, all those kind of things is spectacular. It's everywhere. And there are some interesting ideas, and so no one else will be talking about this today, but a little bit of cannabis every day might help keep brain aging at bay, and having lots of sex. So we're literally going further and further towards sex, drugs, and rock and roll with every presentation. So anyway. So this came out in the Express last week, and it was a doctor was talking about secrets of the world's healthiest village, and there was 8 ideas there that he shared, and these, it was almost like Rangan was saying it. It's Dr. Malhotra, and between Rangan and Dr. Sachin Patel, who's on next, and Rupi's on later, seems like the only doctors that are really making sense in England about longevity are all of Indian descent. I don't know what's common about that, but smart people. So there's obviously a lot to do with food, but there's obviously a lot beyond food. And so what we decided to do in the lead up to this, we have the biggest network of doctors that are interested in functional medicine and health creation. We decided to crowdsource from them, what are the 10 principles of health creation? What are ideas that we could build future legislation on? What are concepts that, if we wanted to start again, what would we build it on? So we crowdsourced this. Now, I had to, in order for this presentation, I had to bring all those ideas together. Now, that's not really my job. I've never done this before, but I want to sort of give an idea of what these 10 principles of health creation were. So first is find purpose. Now, this was broadly defined. It could be about, the way that you choose to interact with religion and the way that you work. It could be about, a lot of doctors find that the patients that get better the quickest have some why they're searching to get better. So some sort of purpose is a principle of health creation, because people who have purpose, a reason to want to get better, do get better and live longer. And that was reflected in what Maskell's found from going along there. So it's quite broad, but the reason why it's number 1 is it was mentioned more times than anything else. The second, we've already talked about, environment is everything, and I really agree with what Tom said, is that it's the environment that dictates the behavior. And so we need to create an environment that, Rangan spoke as well, just briefly there, about the environment, the food environment. How do we make it easy for people to make the right choices? 3, and I took this from Tom, health is a skill, because it actually shows specifically that, this is something that we can learn. This is something that we can learn and enact. And that's a very different idea than the idea of health, genetics that we've had, which is like it's quite a predetermined, medicine is done to us by doctors, and we're not really an active participant. It's a skill that we can learn. 4, the power of community. So, Rangan touched on it, Tom touched on it, but this idea of human social genomics, we're going to talk a little bit about that, but the power of peer-to-peer support. Peer-to-peer support is the only inexhaustible resource that we have. The only inexhaustible resource that we have in facilitating health transformation, so we need to take best advantage of it. Also, responsibility for the inputs. We're going to talk a little bit later about, some of those ideas, but there are a lot of inputs that go into health, and ultimately, there's no one who's going to be able to control those inputs apart from us. congruence with nature came up a lot from our practitioners, is that there's a certain way in which we've adapted into nature, and if we're congruent with nature, that what strikes me here is that none of the blue zones have extensive medical organizations that solve all the problems. It's about they happened, they weren't created. And so, congruence in nature was a big point. The harnessing of technology. We're going to talk about technology here today, and we're going to talk about some very advanced technology. But what we're starting to see is, even in the practices that we work with, is that those practices that take best advantage of technology, making it easy for people to do the right thing, either through things like telemedicine or tracking their behaviors, empowers patients towards good health. Knowing oneself was a big part, knowing thyself, really coming to an understand. It could be understood of mind-body medicine, yoga, meditation, those kind of things. Coming into an inner knowing of itself was really important. And the ninth was this idea of the therapeutic order, and this comes from naturopathic medicine. And I think it's really relevant to thinking how we're going to roll out this in Guernsey or otherwise. And the naturopathic therapeutic order only postulates that you should use the least expensive, least invasive intervention first and work your way up. And drugs and surgery at the top, they don't come first. And that's why we've got it backwards, mainly because of financial reasons. But the therapeutic order is a really interesting and powerful concept that came from naturopathic medicine that I think is ready for its time to shine. And the 10th I'm going to leave open. The goal of this 10 principles of health creation is that this would be a learning, this would be an iterative process that over the next 10 years we would continue to build on. And so if you have ideas of what this 10th principle could be, or if you disagree with the first 9 that we came up with, send us a tweet, be in touch. We want this 10 principles to be something that the future of legislation could be built on, not just in Guernsey, but every other place. There are plenty of other little places around the world, like Dubai, like Estonia, where they're really far ahead in thinking about what the future of government look like. If you live in Estonia, there's literally no paperwork. The government operates in a zero paper system. So there are people that are forward thinking, and we want to create this 10 principles of health creation as something that could be the basis of future care. So the question we have to ask ourselves is, what's the plan? What are we going to do from here? So I've been involved in medicine in America, and one of the things that we're moving towards in America and every other place is this concept of value in healthcare. And it's a mathematical equation. I'm going to put my maths teacher hat on for a moment. I hope this doesn't send everyone to sleep, but it's a very basic equation. There are more complicated equations like ICER, incremental cost effectiveness ratios, but basically value in healthcare comes down to this. What is the outcome divided by the cost? And when we start to look at the fact that medicine is moving towards value-based care, we start to realize that this is a conversation that we need to be having more and more. And how do we get better outcomes at lower cost? Better outcomes at lower cost. Now, typically what we've seen is there are 2 levels of care. There's sort of like a core, which is doctors talking to each other. If you have a group of doctors, this sort of came to me, this idea of the core, came to me in Australia, where I sat with a group of 15 practitioners, 5 doctors, 5 naturopaths, and 5 auxiliary practitioners in this little clinic in Byron Bay, and I heard them discuss the clients that they were working with. They had 6 inpatients there, and they had all these outpatients, and I was like, this is really amazing. To get the ideas of 15 different practitioners about your case is incredible. But it's also incredibly expensive because you're paying for 15 practitioners' time for that time. So there's a core that's really valuable, but it's really expensive. And also the care of a physician is expensive too. They're the most expensive providers. And so, that's the way that medicine has been, core and care. Now, there are ways to reduce that and make it more efficient, like telemedicine. But if you're actually spending time with a doctor, it's expensive. And, we'd be speaking today. Guernsey doesn't have unlimited money to make this happen. In fact, it would be really good if we could see, like Tom said, the cost curve to go down, and there's definitely the potential to that. Now, in order to do that, we have to put a layer between us and the medical system. That is what's going to transform health, and I want to talk about this layer has 3 parts. So the first thing is coaching. Coaching has never been a part of medicine before. Coaching came from business, where business realized that if they could change the behavior of the employees, then the bottom line would increase. But coaching is taking off now in America, taking off all around the world, and even on this island you're going to hear from Darren a little bit later about the power of coaching, but it's about behavior change. Now the reason why this is really important, if we go back to this equation, is that the cost of a coach is about a fifth to a tenth of a doctor. Right? So if the doctor is $300 an hour and the coach is $50 an hour, or whatever that works out in wherever you are, is the doctor 6 times better or 10 times better at getting results than the coach? Definitely not, especially when it comes to reversing the behavior changes associated with type 2 diabetes. This is the equation that matters. And so what we need to start to think of, what is the lowest possible cost that gets the biggest outcome? And coaching has to be a part of it. So coaching is a serious layer, because the time that you spend with a coach, the way that you pay the coach is way less. And I know that Mark, one of the reasons why I think Guernsey has a great shot for many other reasons, is that there are a lot of coaches, and there's more and more coaches on Guernsey who can come in and fill in this role. The next layer is community. And the beauty of community is that it's essentially free. If you and I both have, type 2 diabetes, and we start supporting each other back and forth, calling each other. My mother-in-law a couple of years ago lost 110 pounds. And the only thing that changed in her was that she had to be accountable to someone else. And at the end of the day, call them and tell them what she'd eaten on that day. Now, the interesting thing about that is that no money changed hands at any moment. And yet there was value to both of them, because she didn't want to call up and say, I slipped, I went to McDonald's, I messed up. She didn't want to do that. And so her behavior was changed by something that cost nothing. You heard from Tom on the idea of social genomics. There is, if you go to our YouTube channel, there's a doctor by the name of Dr. George Slavich, who works at the UCLA Stress Lab, who's shown that social stress is a bigger driver of health outcomes and mortality than smoking, what you eat, and alcohol. Social stress, the stress between people, and particularly targeted rejection, when you're rejected from a social group. So community is incredibly powerful, and one of the biggest things that we're going to have to get to if we're going to transform Guernsey is creating communities that support each other. And you're going to hear about this. One of the things that just came up was the cost of food, right? Healthy foods are too cheap. So Dr. Sachin Patel, who's going to be speaking later, has pioneered groups of people that do community batch cooking. So batch cooking is an idea where you cook all of your meals in one go, because it takes a lot of time to cook healthy every day, right? So imagine getting 20 people into a commercial kitchen and cooking all of your meals together, splitting it up into glass Tupperware and taking it home and eating. Those are some of the ideas where you can take advantage of your community. You can cook 20 healthy meals in 90 minutes a week. These are some of the ideas that are going to transform. That is the future of medicine right there. And then the last part is content. So content, could be anything. Content you're hearing today, this webcast will be online forever for free. Content is pretty much free. There are people right now, because I see them on Twitter, who are watching Doctor in the House and are taking action on what they're learning. And there's no cost at all. In fact, they're reducing their burden on the medical system by taking action. And so this is what we've been teaching essentially for the last few years. And if you look at it from this angle, you see that for a patient, you go through and you use the minimum input to get the maximum output. And that is the future of value-based care. If you can make the changes and live long based on your understanding of content, that's free. If it's community, it might be, a little bit of cost, but very low cost. Coaching at a much lower cost than anything in the medical system. And you only go into the medical system for the care of the providers or the core team as you get sicker and sicker. So as those things don't work. So the question we have to ask is, will this work in Guernsey? And this model that we've been teaching in America and all around the world is based on something that I don't think you have in Guernsey as much, and you certainly don't have in the UK, and that's physician entrepreneurship. And I think what we need to see is that models built on physician entrepreneurship are a good bet in America, because there's a history of private practice. But in Guernsey, the UK, and other countries with a history of socialized medicine, there's really not the desire from the doctors to do their own accounting and HR and those kind of things. So we need a new model. And so what we're proposing here is something transformational for Guernsey, and I'm very excited to share this. This is sort of like a world premiere of some of our thoughts of what we can do to actually build it. And I'm constantly, this has been on the bottom of my email, this quote has been on the bottom of my email for the last 4 years, and it's a Bucky Fuller quote. It says, "You never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, you need to build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete." And in healthcare, surely you can see, more than in anything else, there is the opportunity to create the new model that makes the existing model obsolete. How do you reduce the number of diabetic neuropathies? You go upstream and you deal with the insulin sensitivity 20 years ago, 10 years ago. There's a progress that happens, and we could go in and build the new model that makes the existing model obsolete. And I'm here today to tell you that I've been building communities of doctors around functional medicine for the last 4 years. There is an opportunity for any health professional around the world at this moment to build a successful functional medicine clinic, because it's needed all over the world. But I'm also here to tell you that that is not, we're going to hedge physician entrepreneurship in the future of what we're doing, and we're going to build the new system that makes the existing system obsolete, and it's called new. Functional medicine for everyone. There is no reason why you have to go to a doctor to get the kind of care that we're talking about, the kind of behavior change. It can be delivered on the phone. Everyone has a smartphone. The cost can be reduced significantly. So what is new going to do? First thing, we're going to do the 3 C's that we talked about. We're going to talk about content. Later this year, August 21st, we're going to do the first completely free online summit on interpreting your genetics, because for the reasons that Michelle and Tom just shared, up until a few years ago, there was, or still in the general population, there's an idea that your genes create your health. And for the first time, there's the widespread adoption of genetic testing. Genetic testing has got cheaper and cheaper, so the fact that now it's like $100 in America that you can get your genetic testing, and I am scared that many people will get that testing and think, I'm going to get Alzheimer's, I'm going to get heart disease, I'm going to get these things, and it's just not true. So August 21 to 28, it's going to be very free. It's go to geneticsummit.com, and we're going to have all the best speakers in the world, including people like Craig Venter, who was the person who deciphered the human genome, Dr. George Slavich, who's the guy from Human Social Genomics, and many more. The second thing is coaching. Coaching, we have seen already, does not need to be done in person. Coaching can be done over a phone and can be just as effective, and not even face-to-face. It could be done via text message. We're seeing that more people prefer from a medical experience. They don't care who gets back to them. They just want someone to get back to them straight away. So we see the most advanced clinics in America. You can have a text message conversation with someone from your doctor's office, and it doesn't have to be, oh, he can see you in 2.5 weeks when you need something now. And then the third thing is community, and this is probably the biggest idea that I've ever shared, and it's super exciting, but there is a technology. What Tom talked, I completely agree that a health cost sharing community is the most efficient way of reducing healthcare costs. But unfortunately, what Tom didn't tell you is that the system that we have in America that Tom and I are both part of is run on paper by a bunch of Mennonites, and it's not really that efficient at all. And so there is a coming efficiency that can create and can build, and it's called the blockchain. And the blockchain is the technology of trust. And you know, this is when in 10 years, everyone know, you may have heard of Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a financial product that's built on it. But blockchain has the potential to be able to create these health cost sharing communities worldwide and dramatically reduce the cost of chronic disease. So with functional medicine delivered for everyone, plus the power of the blockchain to organize and automate the whole thing, we're going to build the most powerful cost reduction technology that's ever been built. We would love to trial it in Guernsey, and we are very excited to see how Guernsey can be a test bed for reducing healthcare costs and actually do what Moore's law predicts and bring down the healthcare costs exponentially. So, you know, I've been working in the field with doctors for the last 12 years. And, you know, many doctors have told me, James, it takes someone outside of medicine to come up with the kind of solutions you're talking about, because we're all doctors and we're focused on that. And I come back to this quote from William Mayo. He says, "The aim of medicine is to prevent disease and prolong life. The ideal of medicine is to eliminate the need of the physician." I think that that's a future that we can all believe in. Thank you so much.